Okay, all my stuff is whack. And one of my screens has frozen now. So I'm assuming that I'm on stream, but I don't know. Oh dear. I'll tell you what, this is not gonna work for me, so I'm just gonna do some technical stuff in the background and hopefully we can fix whatever is going on here. Okay, so what I've done is there is now a physical cable where once there was just Wi-Fi, and that seems to have fixed the situation. So now we can commence with what we're doing here, which is this is a live stream. Anything could happen on this beautiful Sunday. Hey people in the chat, and do let me know if you're there. If nobody's there, I'm just gonna fuck off and go do something better. We've all got better things to do with our Sundays, so let's just get this over and done with as quickly as possible. My baby is asleep next door, and the baby is on the monitor. If he twitches, I'm out. I won't be saying goodbye, but hopefully we can get some stuff done before that happens. So what is the plan? What's the plan today? The plan is to share my screen. I'm just going to do some pull requests, I think. Shouldn't be surprising. There's a lot of them, and I need to get them done. So yeah, we're going to do some pull requests. Right, so I've already gone through a lot of these and left comments a while ago. Some of them have actually progressed, but before I go back to those older ones, I'm just going to go through as many of the ones I haven't been seen to yet as I can. So I think last time I did the pop 3 input from Marco, I think that needs a bit of work, but it's not clear to me personally what the best course of action is on that one. It might just be a market is experimental and don't worry about it situation, but it kind of depends on what we can do with the client library. If we can maybe change it. This one, enable register self to NACO's service registry. I hadn't heard of this before. I did comment on the previous version of this pull request. I'm still not entirely sure what this is going to do for us, so I'm going to leave this one. Investigation necessary, and I'm not gonna do that to you on stream. So got this one, add a new metadata entry to Kafka input. Context, in a Kafka topic that is configured with a cleanup policy of compact, a producer can produce a message with a null value to flag that on the next topic compaction, this message will be deleted from the topic. By adding this new metadata, one does not have to check in the pipeline if the content is empty. See, there's like tombstone messages, you might know them as. And yeah, currently in Bloblang, you can just reference the raw content of the message and check that that is empty or not. And act appropriately, but that doesn't distinguish between a null message that is a literal tombstone and a message that's not a tombstone and is also empty. I'm not sure how often that's going to be the case, but I think it's reasonable to have an explicit way of distinguishing, so I'm quite happy for this to be a thing. What we're doing is writing a new metadata field called Kafka_tombstone_message, and that is a Boolean type, and basically if the actual value is nil, so rather than just being empty, if it's actually nil, then we set this to be true. And we're doing this both for the Kafka Franz input and the Sarama one, which is cool. The question, I guess, is whether we want to rename that to something else. Because what we're actually checking is whether the payload is null. But then that indicates that it's a tombstone message. I'm not sure whether there's any room for making that a bit more generic. So maybe we would just say Kafka null message, something like that. I don't know whether that would be more appropriate, but I'm happy for it to be tombstone message for now. If anybody's got any thoughts on that, let me know. This is a dynamic, fluid experience. If you've got things to contribute in the chat, then go ahead and do that, and I'll probably ignore it, but maybe I won't, so why not? But yeah, I think this is fine as it is. We don't have any tests, which would be nice. I'm not sure how easy it is to set up integration tests that would put a bunch of tombstone messages through. But it's fairly harmless stuff. So I think it's fine as is. Yeah, I'm going to approve it. And I'm going to add in my very generic response to PRs. Looks good to me. Thanks, maintainer. And we have 2 commits. Do we need those 2 commits? Update website documentation. I don't need those 2. So this comment here, the baby has just woken up, y'all. I'm keeping an eye on the situation as it unfolds. My belief is that this is not a situation that I will have to intervene in. Another member of my household could well get in on that action. Yeah, okay, I think this is sorted. So yeah, the comment here, I'm fine with the process, blah, 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 blah. So this is whether or not we're going to add the metadata in all cases and just set it to false if it's not a tombstone message or not. George has contributed a comment, and I have actually read this comment. Does null exclusively mean tombstone? Sounds like it might be narrowing the definition of null. We can maybe search. Can we search? Kafka tombstone. Kafka null values. Sorry, let me do this on the screen. Is there like any specific matches tombstone records? That is records with a null value. Basically, I'm just looking anywhere in the official Kafka documentation or the Confluent documentation that indicates that, yeah, they are one and the same. Matches tombstone records, that is records with a null value. That seems reasonable to me. I mean, this is Confluent's developer docs. I think it's reasonable. I'm going to leave it there. So the question is, do I want to do a squash commit? Do I want to squash that? Is 2 commits too many? I'm just here for the English breakfast, Connell Blobfish, and I'm learning there is a baby. There is a baby. There is a baby. There's also a baby scream. More twists than a Tarantino movie. It's more of a M. Night Shyamalama Ding Dong film where it's like, hey, my life is great, everything's so easy, and then right at the end there's just the one twist of, no, there's a baby, and then that's it, scene. I'm going to do the two commits. I think it's fine. 2 commits is reasonable. If it was like 10 commits, then yeah, squash it every time. But 2 is fine. Now, I'm going to update the changelog. Metadata field. Kafka. Tombstone. Message. Added to the... Oh my god, my typing today. Added to the Kafka and Kafka Franz inputs. Okay, that'll do. Next one. Add new S3 input SQS config to drop SQS message on specific errors. So I do remember this being part of a conversation already. Drop errors, a list of errors which we do not want to requeue SQS messages. So the question here, but basically in a AWS SQS setup, it's a very common pattern. You've got an S3 bucket and maybe things being added to the bucket on the fly. So rather than just reading the whole bucket as kind of like a batch job, what you want to do is you want to read it more like a stream. So as things get added to S3, whatever is listening on that bucket consumes that thing. AWS has a very specific way of setting something like that up. Hang on a minute, have I frozen? Tell me in the chat if I've frozen. Oh, that'd be really annoying. I'm just going to act like I'm not frozen right now. So you end up with a setup that's a common pattern in AWS land where you can configure an SQS queue, simple queue service queue, to hook into events that the bucket emits. So it'll emit, for example, like a new thing uploaded jobby. I can't remember what the events are actually called, and then those get sent to SQS by AWS, and then something else can listen to those events and then go and download the new thing. So you basically turn it into a queue. So for some reason my little dashboard is telling me I'm frozen right now. I'm just going to refresh that. And it's a very useful pattern. I mean, obviously if you're using S3, it's a very useful pattern, and it's very useful in stream processing land. But it does mean it's a bit complicated, basically. You've got multiple components, multiple moving parts. When you configure this in Benthos land, what it looks like is, so you got a bucket, and you can actually, I think, leave that blank if you're consuming SQS messages. But then what we actually have is this optional SQS block. So if you left this empty and you just specified a bucket, it would download all the files in the bucket and then it would end. So the stream would finish and the service would close. But what you can do is you can add an SQS URL, and if you do that, then what Benthos will do is it will connect to that SQS queue and it will consume messages from it. And it's only messages that are consumed from SQS that trigger downloading of things. Now, that means an acknowledgement is more to do with the SQS part of it than the S3 part, because SQS has its own delivery guarantees, things get retried, You get a visibility timeout that determines how long you've got until a message gets resent. And what that means is you read an SQS message that is associated with an S3 item, then you go and download the S3 item, and then you can either choose to delete the SQS message, which is basically an acknowledgement. We've dealt with this thing, we no longer ever need it. Or you can even just like reject it and re-queue it. You reset the visibility timeout to 0, and that essentially triggers SQS to deliver it to somewhere else. So if you find that you don't have access to the S3 bucket, and you can't download this thing that the SQS message told you to get, you can knack it by essentially re-queuing the SQS messages and then forgetting about it. And maybe that would get routed. But what happens to that knack depends on your SQS configuration. So my understanding, the last time I looked at this, is there's all sorts of things that you can do with that. So if somebody re-queues an SQS message, you can give it a maximum number of retry attempts. So it might get routed to a service, but then if it gets rejected, it goes to somewhere else. If it gets rejected, it goes somewhere else. And if it gets rejected a certain number of times, then you might be able to configure your SQS queue to just say, hey, forget about it then. It's happened too many times. This is a bad message. Let's just forget the whole thing. That would be fine if you don't really care about the delivery. If it's really important that you deal with every SQS message that comes through, then maybe you would have to route that to a dead letter queue, so somebody else consumes that event. It goes somewhere that you can refer to later and check up on whatever that message was. Why didn't the download happen? All that sort of stuff. But that kind of says to me that Benthos doesn't need to do anything clever when it comes to ACKs or NACKs. We can either acknowledge it by deleting the message when we've successfully processed an S3 bucket item, or if we can't process it for whatever reason, we can just keep rejecting them. That's not what this particular use case is looking for. So what they want to do is they want to be able to specify specific errors by which we will reset the timeout and therefore knack a message. But some errors we might actually want to just drop the request. So we don't care. We don't want to go to a dead letter queue. We don't want to send it somewhere else. We just want to forget about this message because it's never going to work. It's something dumb. That makes sense. That's fine to me, but it's going to be adding a bit of complexity to Benthos. Actually, this pull request really doesn't look that bad. This doesn't look bad at all. Basically, what they've done is they added a new field, which is an array of strings, and I'm assuming these have to exactly match. So what happens? Let's expand this a bit. We read an SQS message. This code is really complicated, unfortunately. There's not really an awful lot I can do about that because it's quite a complicated problem. But yeah, this code isn't particularly yummy. But basically what we do is we read an SQS message and then we extract from that message all the objects that it entails. So it could be that an SQS is an event where an object's been uploaded to the bucket, you have to download that object, and there's just one object. Or it could be a whole bunch of them. It could be multiple. And they could all be from different buckets as well. Wow! So what we've got some logic for extracting that, and it's configuration based, so you can specify a path. This I'm going to change at some point, because right now all you can do is specify the path within the payload, assuming it's JSON. And you basically are instructing Benthos to follow that path and extract a bunch of keys, and also bucket names potentially. So yeah, this is the logic for doing that bit. If there's no objects found in that payload, then we just continue, and it's basically an ACK. We acknowledge the message because it didn't tell us to do anything. So yep, we can do that pretty quickly. We can do nothing very, very quickly. But then what we do is, assuming there are objects, then what we do is every single object that was part of that message, we construct this this entity. So this is why it gets complicated, because we might have had to download multiple objects from this one SQS message, and we can only acknowledge when they've all been dealt with, when they've all been downloaded and processed. But if any of them are rejected for whatever reason, then we do a knack. We do a negative acknowledgement. and I've got some logic here that basically just creates, I say basically, it's not particularly basic. We've got an integer, which we're going to treat as an atomic, which has the number of objects that we need from this SQS message. And then for each one, we have an acOnce function. So we're using sync.once type. And then we create this S3 object target thing. So we have a slice of pending objects that we need to download as part of this input source. And every time read gets called, we pull another thing off the list. And they could be processed asynchronously, so we could be processing multiple at the same time, or we could be doing it sequentially, depends on your config. But what we do for each one of these, we just add another object, and this is a thing that has the object key, the bucket, when we receive the notification to get this thing, I think that is. And then finally we construct an acknowledgement function, and that is a closure within here. Now before, what this would be is a thing that acknowledges if we have a nil error, but only when we're the last object. So once our pending acts are 0, so basically everything has been acknowledged now, we acknowledge the thing. Or if there is an error, what we have to do is we have to knack. And obviously we only want to do that once. So if this act function gets called multiple times, I don't think that's actually the case in Benthos internals, but whatever, you might as well protect against it anyway. And what we do is we actually store pending acts -1, so we put it below 0, so when the other counters here reduce it, it's never going to hit 0. So we either acknowledge once or we knack once. Or potentially we knack multiple times, but that actually doesn't matter. Yeah, I've even got a comment here. It's possible that this is called for one message at the exact same time as another is act, but if the act message triggers a full like of the origin message, it shouldn't be possible. It's also harmless. Yeah, it looks like I've already figured that out, but... I think what I mean is... I don't know. But yeah, this knack SQS message call is what essentially does the visibility timeout getting set to 0 thing. This is all quite old code to me. I haven't touched this in a little while. But what this PR is doing is it's basically changing the behavior when we do a knack. And instead of just doing it outright, what we do instead is we enter this nested if-else where if we've specified explicit drop errors. So the concept of like, what does drop mean? In a Benthos context. So dropping, obviously Benthos is super obsessive over delivery guarantees and making it as clear as possible in the docs as we can. When you filter a message, say you've read something from Kafka and then you delete the thing, that's a drop. You've intentionally dropped the data. So we often use drop as a word to describe cases where we've got some information that could be really important and we've explicitly decided it's okay to drop it. So for example, if you're doing an HTTP request and you're quite happy to drop the request, so even if it errors, we don't actually care, we can just carry on, then you're kind of accepting the idea that you might be dropping information. We call it drop. So when you drop things, you're acknowledging it. So it looks like we're kind of following that theme here. So there are errors by which, if they occur, we're happy to just drop the whole thing and accept that it was a mistake from the beginning. They're using the slices package, which I'm not 100% on. But basically, we're just checking if our error is within it. I would probably say it's more useful to have regular expressions here if you're going to do something like this, where if you're going to have like a list of errors by which we might want to just drop things. Maybe we would want to have patterns rather than explicit error messages. Oh god, there's a whole load of messages. Sorry, I'm following. George, we're looking to implement a similar thing for GCP Cloud Storage buckets and PubSub. You can set up a topic where storage events are published. Started to think I'd rather have a PubSub or SQS input and then use S3 or GCS processor to grab the objects. Smashing both concerns in an input feels wrong. I kind of agree that having all of this baked into a single input makes things a little bit gross. I have thought about this because we do have an SQS input and we've got an S3 cache. If we made an S3 processor, it might be a bit better. The problem with the cache is it's a little bit too abstract from the underlying bucket actions, so it'd be more useful to have like an explicit bucket processor. But yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, we can always do both, but yeah, this code here is not one that I enjoy having anything to do with, and I've always kind of had in my mind this idea that wouldn't it be nice to just get rid of it entirely. The problem is it's a very common pattern, and people who use this pattern often don't understand how it actually works. So what I mean by that is they've read some AWS documentation that explains, hey, this is how you set up S3 as a queue system, and they follow that tutorial bit by bit. And what they're really doing is they're just using tools to glue all these things together, so they don't actually understand what the SQS message looks like. Which, by the way, if you're trying to find out what the format of these SQS messages are for these events, it's so hard. It's easier to just set up the queue system and pull the data after configuring this whole thing, because the documentation is just so stupid and vague from AWS. So I really wouldn't be surprised if a large portion of the people who are using S3 in this way have no idea what the events look like, which you would sort of need to know. We could obviously fill that gap by having a tutorial in the docs, but I don't know. But yeah, maybe at some point. What we need to do here, if we want to go with that approach, is have an S3 processor with like a bunch of different things that you can do. Why not take a mapping that could evaluate to true instead of a list of error strings? Seems more useful. We could do that. See, it's kind of a double-edged sword having mappings in, because it's technically more powerful. You can do more stuff with it, you got more flexibility, it might look a bit neater as well, depending on your use case. The problem though is it's another thing for people to learn. So you can quite realistically have a S3 to Kafka Benthos config and not have to know the Bloblang mapping language. I mean, this itself is kind of an advanced feature anyway. I'm not sure most people using this setup are going to really care about this sort of stuff, so maybe. Yeah, actually, maybe that's a good point that I just made on your behalf, George. I came in late and now have my own hungry. Right, Sean. How long are you going for? I don't know. My original plan was an hour, but we're already halfway through that, so don't know. I might end it now, to be honest. My baby's awake, so I want to go play with my baby while he's awake. But it can wait half an hour. Let's say half an hour. I'm going to try and get maybe a couple more pull requests. I might have to do a rush job and race through a few of the low-hanging fruit pull requests. We use the S3 SQS input, and I'm blissfully unaware of how those messages. Yeah, basically. I have a feeling lots of people, when they're using Benthos, the main thing they're getting out of Benthos is not having to read the AWS documentation. I have done that for you. Yeah, I think those are good points. Have I already commented on this? I have not. Okay, I'm going to respond to this, but I'm going to leave it on the back burner for a bit. I like the concept, and I think this is useful. But I'm still thinking through alternatives to having an explicit list of errors for cases where they might be many but similar, because that's where this would really be a pain, is if you've got like I couldn't do the thing because foo. I couldn't do the thing because bar. I couldn't do the thing because Baz. It'd be nice if you just do I couldn't do the thing / anything. I'm still thinking through alternatives to having an explicit list of errors for cases where there might be many but similar. Maybe a Bloblang mapping that resolves to a Boolean, but I'm not sure yet. Sorry, George. I think that probably would be the one I'd settle on. There's like other places in the Benthos code base where we just have like a list of regular expressions, and I actually think that does work fairly well, but then people have to use regular expressions. Oh. Maybe. Bloblang mappings also Boolean, but not sure yet. Sorry, George. Leave this one with me for now. See, the only problem with this sort of stuff is I want to spend a bit of time thinking this one through and doing a proper job of it, but that requires time, and often that's not available to me. Right, so this is another one from Marco. So this is an issue that they've encountered with Cassandra using the GoSQL underlying library, and they're having to do some sort of hacky workarounds for this, which is not great. Unfortunately, it looks as though the potential fix they have here says it's getting stuck still, so I'm just gonna hold off on this one. There's 2 open issues, neither of them have been closed yet. We might literally just be blocked on that, unfortunately. Adding the socket syslog input component. I've already had a little look at this, and it was fine, I think, from what I remember. We are making use of this library, so syslog, in order to have a syslog input, this is basically just a socket connection, but we're parsing out very specific message types. So yeah, you can see parse syslog message, so we're essentially getting something of a very specific format and extracting it into a structured form. What's interesting here is, I think I need to do a bit of research on this. The implementation looks good. We're using the new plugin APIs, current supports syslog header formats. And the docs even make it explicit that you could use the socket server input if you want something more flexible. I'm not entirely sure about... Oh. Yeah, some bits of this need looking at. This isn't a huge amount of code, so this probably wouldn't take me very long to just work through and make a couple changes. Basically, the things that I'm looking at this and thinking would need changing are this mechanism here, so creating a listener, and then blocking until a sig term. I think that's not something, especially an OS exit, that's not really something that we can have in a plugin implementation, because it's going to mess with if you're using streams mode, for example. Every component within Benthos needs to be able to gracefully stop. So if that's not going to be plausible, then we will need to do something else. And then the other thing is, if we're just pulling out the content, that all the information people are going to want? I'm assuming there's other bits of data that people might be interested in. Let's have a look. Okay, looks like there is a tag and there is content. So maybe... Oh, here we go. So parts of log parts. Is that what we're calling? We're calling dump? Exit the thing, remove from our buffer. They're called parse. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, calling dump. Nope. There's quite a lot of information here that might be useful. I'm assuming. There's like metadata fields. I'm just going to add quick comments here. We can't really allow this, so I'm talking about the signal waiting and then OS exit stuff. We can't really allow this within a component implementation since in setups such as streams mode, we need to be able to dynamically spin up and tear down components, potentially multiple times. Ideally, we want a mechanism for close to trigger this cleanup. This listener cleanup logic. I'm going to start a review because I'm also going to add a comment to this stuff. It does format sprint F. Do we need that? Log parts is a map of string to interface. And the content... It is actually a string though. Because we're looking at this, right? I think... There's a better way, but I can just do that separately. Would it make sense to pull out other bits of data and add them and ask them and add them as metadata fields? In which case this method will need to return a message type instead. And then, did GitHub do that right? Something. This looks good, but one comment that needs addressing and one minor nit. Extracting metadata fields is something we can do at a later time if needed. Just thought it'd be cool. The shutdown stuff needs changing though. Definitely needs changing. Otherwise, I'm just gonna leave it there. Comment. So I always do these pull requests as just comment. I don't know why I'm so shy of actually rejecting a PR. I mean, that's effectively what I'm doing by not merging it, is I'm rejecting it for now. But I don't know, it just makes me feel a bit sad to have to give people a red when actually they've done something that's pretty cool. Just because I can't merge it right now in its current state doesn't mean it's not cool and valid. I don't know, I'm overthinking it, I think. Optionally fail when mvars are unset. So, strict env. Fail when unset environment variables are referenced in a configuration without a default specified. So I 100% agree with this goal. I think maybe we should just make this the default anyway. Basically, in a config, you can have environment variable interpolations, and environment variables will just get swapped in. And you can use it for kind of like dynamically setting bits of your config, like, passwords and things like that. But right now, if the environment variable isn't set, then it just resolves to an empty string. That can be useful. Some people rely on that. But it's possible to check explicitly whether the environment variable is enabled. So it might make more sense to say that we error, maybe just linting errors or something, when the environment variable doesn't exist, but allow you to explicitly not care if you want to. I don't know. If we go down the linting bit, linting, maybe it shouldn't be a linting thing because my baby's crying. My baby is feeling my brain frustration and is lashing out. Daddy doesn't know what to do. But anyway, what I was going to say is I can't merge this as it is because we obviously can't panic. That's how this currently works. Rather than pushing an error back, it panics, which is a no. I like strict env for the folks that care about empty envars could explicitly use a default empty string. That's a good point. Care about empty envars. Yeah, there's a potential. But I'm just going to go check on the baby. I'll be back in a bit to close my stream because I was only going to do it for an hour anyway. Maybe see you in a minute, maybe not. Okay, things have progressed. The baby has been seen to and triaged. I think he's got a cold. Just a mild one. It's not a big one. He's very whingy. So I'm going to shut this the fuck down and fuck off. Sorry for people who were basing their entire Sunday around this experience. But I don't really care. Sorry for people who still have pull requests open and haven't had them seen to yet. I might do another one later today. Depends how things go. But priority right now is going to be trying to get him back to sleep because he's not slept enough. Thank you for watching. I know it's just been a short one, but it's just how it goes, isn't it? Hopefully it's not been too shit. And see you on the next one. Or like and subscribe. Please like and subscribe. Well, the baby gets it. I wouldn't do that to the baby. I would fuck you up though if you don't. Find out where you live. And I'll make